So Jen Vagel is the executive director and founder of Commonwealth Kitchen, which is also, she's an entrepreneur. These are two incredible kick-ass entrepreneurs sitting next to me who have gone through quite the journey. Jen is also on our Food Nutrition Innovation Council. She's one of my sheroes in Boston. And I always say, like, Jen's my spirit animal. Like, it's just shared spirit field here completely. And then Cassandra Campbell, I'm so glad that we're finally getting to meet. If you guys had lunch with us before this event, that was Cassandria's restaurant. Yes. Unbelievable. And so what we're going to be talking about a little bit is talking about food justice and talking about health forward entrepreneurship in our neighborhoods, and for you to hear a little bit about each of their journeys and then hear about how we're funding these things in this time of COVID, in this time of short money for foodpreneurs, especially foodpreneurs of color in neighborhoods. How do we do this? And these two women are going to show us how we get this done. So Jen, introduce yourself, talk a little bit about Commonwealth Kitchen, and do that first.
Okay. Who here has heard of Commonwealth Kitchen? Way! Look at that. That's awesome. You can tell I have a big mouth, so thank you for that you all now know who we are. So those who don't know the organization, Commonwealth Kitchen is Boston's nonprofit food business incubator and development center. We say that our mission is that we are on a mission. How do we build an equitable, sustainable, just food economy that is truly grounded in racial, social, and economic justice? Boy, that's easy. And our work is really trying to work with entrepreneurs like Cassandra all the way along their journey. So somebody who will come and say, I have a vision for fill in the blank. I want to start a food truck. I have a product idea. I have a meal kit company. Where do you start? And the first thing we do is try to convince you never to do it because the food industry is so friggin' hard. And if we can't convince you not to do it, crazy people, then our job is to really work with businesses all along their journey, from that vision of that idea all the way through to how they become a viable company. So what does that look like? We run a shared use kitchen. Think about it as like a gym membership for food businesses. So we've got all this amazing equipment that businesses can come in and rent by the hour. We pair that with a tremendous amount of business education and training, technical things on everything from food safety, product development, scaling your product, making it shelf stable, to nutritional panels, labels, packaging, distribution, a whole range of programming that, and really trying to work with businesses again along that journey. When you're starting, it's about your permit and your license and who are you marketing to, and as you go, it's how are you thinking about scaling your product, how are you moving from farmers markets to specialty, from specialty to grocery, or into institutional accounts. And then we're really working on how do we help with market access. Remember, our work is about racial and economic justice. So the businesses that we are working with primarily are women, immigrants, people of color. Historically underrepresented, access to capital, enormous challenge for these businesses, and often doing products and services that are unfamiliar. So them finding capital, them finding relationships, enormously difficult. Getting Whole Foods or whoever else to return a phone call doesn't happen. And so our work is trying to make those connections and connect the dots, including on the supply chain. And the last thing we do, because, well, there's many more things we do, but the last thing I'll say.
Because you're crazy and you can't stop, yeah.
Can't, no. But that a lot of people in the food industry are very interested in is that we actually do on-demand, small batch food manufacturing. This doesn't exist, as far as I know, anywhere else, because it's unbelievably difficult to do, because the structures in the industry are not set up, the equipment is not set up to do on-demand, small batch. It is not a world that is about flexibility and nimbleness. It is about big food doing all things exactly the same all the time. And what we try to do is think about, we work with farmers in the summertime when all their food comes in, all the produce comes in at the same time, and they can't sell it because the market crashes. So what do? Well, we just did the very simple thing and say, hey, we'll develop a recipe, we'll get all the approvals done, we'll turn it into pickles or tomato sauce or whatever else, and farmer, you just drop it off and we will do everything else because that's what we know how to do. And so really the work that we are doing is how do we connect those dots to try to make the opportunity for our business owners. So think about a business owner that is making jerk sauce and making it in our shared kitchen, and how do you scale that? So typically they would make it themselves for a little while, they would get to a certain point, and they would need to go to a third party to make it for them, a co-packer. The co-packers do a thing, they do it one way, it's how they do it all the time with all the same ingredients, and if you don't do that, they will not take you. And they also really want a big scale that our companies can't meet. And so we found very simply like a salsa company that was doing fresh salsa using local tomatoes. Could not find a co-packer that would work with local tomatoes. Why? Water, viscosity, sugar content all changed. They couldn't figure out how to do it. So we are filling that middle where we are doing that manufacturing. It is essentially a way of aggregating work. So we are doing small little processes for all of our companies, creates from part-time jobs into full-time jobs on our staff. We are training those staff, and then we are investing in all the equipment to start to partially automate that production. So now we can start to pay those people better wages, living wages in the city of Boston, which is not easy, but then also thinking about how we can upskill workers and give the business owners a real opportunity to scale their company. So that's kind of the model.
And then I also, yes, exactly. And I also love, Jenna said that people will come in with their grandmother's recipe to make like cookies. And they'll be like, well, I'm going to get rich off this cookie recipe. And Jen's like, it's not math though, it's chemistry. And Jen's like, I got to spend a lot of time teaching chemistry to students who think they only needed to know math to scale their recipe. So love that work. Cassandra, you've gone through Commonwealth Kitchen, and now you've gone on this crazy journey. We talked about it. You were like, oh my God, some days. Tell us about yourself and your journey at Fresh Food Generation.
We're still at Commonwealth Kitchen. I'm the child that's never leaving.
I don't blame you.
However, Cassandra Campbell, co-founder of Fresh Food Generation. We have 4 businesses. So we are we are a restaurant, food truck, catering company, and we also run a grocery box program to 300 families across Massachusetts that's sponsored by Mass Health. And so, it's not working. We started in 2015. I met Jen in 2013, and she was doing what she does now, which is pitching Commonwealth Kitchen. However, it wasn't what it is today. And I met her, and I continued to just follow her because I had the idea for Fresh Food Generation, and I knew that we needed a kitchen space. So I was young and naive, and I did not realize that in order to build out a restaurant, you need a minimum of $500,000. I did not have that in my bank account. And not only that, 85% of food businesses fail within their first 2 years. I had a background in economics. I had a background in urban planning at MIT that I was able to use to sort of understand the business aspects of it. But I can tell you that being a food business owner is one of the most humbling experiences that I've ever had. And particularly as it relates to having a social mission. So we do farm to plate Caribbean American food. Our goal is to increase access to healthy, culturally relevant foods in low-income neighborhoods. It's really a self-serving goal. I grew up in Roxbury. I had the opportunity to travel to Ecuador. I lived there for a year. I had the opportunity to travel to Ghana. I stayed there for 6 months, and then went to school in Cambridge. In those 3 experiences, I was always able to get something that was quick and healthy to eat. And so it was a real culture shock that when I chose to move back into Roxbury, because as an urban planner, it is one of the most beautiful and amazing neighborhoods, I believe, across the nation, I was shocked that there wasn't better food options. And so this was around 2014. A Popeyes had just opened up on Martin Luther King Boulevard. This is a very active boulevard with a tennis court, a YMCA, the most best used swimming pool in the city, an active, so there's a lot of physical activity on this one street. And the only food options are McDonald's, Popeyes, a KFC, I think, and you know, just like pizza shops. And so for me, it was just like the private sector needed to step in, and Popeyes was being praised as an economic tool at the time that had created jobs. I think they had like 60 jobs that 500 people applied for. And I just thought that we had to do better as a society. There's nothing wrong with going to Popeyes and McDonald's once in a while if you choose. However, it should not be your only option. And that's often the case with a lot of low-income neighborhoods. And if you look at Mattapan, you will see that the obesity rate is 30%. So if you are an adult in Mattapan, you have a 30% chance of being obese. And then just anecdotally, I started to see people losing limbs, right, to diet-related issues. And that's really where Fresh Food Generation came from. Jen knows our story. It was not an easy path. The food truck was great, amazing. What we realized was that it was not going to help us be a financially sustainable, for-profit market solution business. And so we had to expand beyond that. We were lucky that we had a lot of great organizations, including Tufts, that would host community events surrounding nutrition and community health and would ask us to cater for them. And catering really became the economic tool in which we used to self-fund ourselves. So the hardest part of this journey has not been how to source food from local farms, how to put it on people's plate, how to serve it in our communities, how to make it culturally relevant. That hasn't been the hardest part. The hardest part has been access to capital. So we started catering to self-fund. The wraps that you guys had today, I was very, very resistant to adding wraps on the menu because they don't fall into the Caribbean category. So we decided, like, fine, you know, we have all these corporate people who want us to like make wraps for them, and so it's really our gateway entry into Fresh Food Generation food. And so the wraps sort of became a game changer for us in that we got into corporate markets, and then we could use the money that we were making in corporate markets to be able to do the work we were doing in our own neighborhoods. We got an opportunity to move into a health center, a small cafe, small kiosk. At this time, even though we were doing well as a business, we didn't have enough cash on hand to be able to buy equipment for this new space. So once again, Commonwealth Kitchen.
I am a professional beggar, we know that.
You should wear a cape, yeah.
Stepped in, helped us get the money for the equipment. We moved into the health center. The vendor there was previously selling cake and hot dogs, and the doctors were really upset because like patients would come upstairs for their appointment with items that was actually harming them that they brought within the health center. And so I'll be quiet so Jen can talk really quickly, but
no, it's a beautiful part of the story. Like, I mean, the stuff that you guys did to then walk in that door in that community health center in a very low-income neighborhood of the city, and to get rid of the cake and the Coke and the hot dogs and bring in like you were doing the zucchini muffins. So
Yes.
teaching people like an easy way in. Yes, it's vegetables.
No
but it's a
wraps.
muffin. No wraps. But kale salad, like getting people to learn what this was. And then no surprise, like we all, no matter where we come from and what money we have in our experience, we want good food. And what they are proving is, of course, people want good food. So guess what? That kale salad, once people knew what it was, everybody wanted the kale salad.
yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, Jen, you learned a lot about, you both did, about the fragility of these foodpreneurs and their ventures during COVID. And what didn't become fragile because of COVID, what you learned was they were already fragile. It just exposed it. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you learned and how you guys have intervened?
Sure. So you can imagine the food industry in general. You've all seen it, what happened in COVID. Think about restaurants, think about food trucks, right? And think about that in a low-income neighborhood. So multiply that by a lot. And so what we knew was we're already dealing, businesses like Fresh Food Generation, severely undercapitalized and just being as scrappy as they could possibly be. And the amount of time and energy that Cassandra spent and I spent with her trying to convince investors and lenders, mission-based ones, government ones, right? Philanthropic-based ones, why this was a really important business and these are the right kinds of businesses to support, and how many of them said, it's food, it's too risky, it fails. Really, brown people are not going to eat kale salad. So no.
They do.
Absolutely. Absolutely they do. But so all of that was there pre-COVID, right? These businesses were already barely making it pre-COVID. And think about those businesses that are in these neighborhoods, like in a low-income neighborhood, that pizza shop, that was somebody who said, I just need to find something that's mine, right? The work that we do, why are we focused on food? It is not because we are a food justice organization. We're an economic development organization. And what we understand is if you want to get people out of poverty, you got to pay them better. They got to have some kind of earned revenue, and they have to have a safety net. And the ways that you can have a safety net in the United States, you inherit it, you own a house, or you own a business. So we looked at this and said, let's help people start businesses. But guess what? When they start those businesses, it doesn't mean that they have all those other relationships and networks. And when you think about the world of gentrification and redlining in the United States and how much that has pulled communities apart, so now you're that person who's in that neighborhood trying to start that pizza shop. Who's the friends and family and networks that's going to help you understand like how to cost anything, how to buy anything, where to buy it? So why is it that in those pizza shops, all you see is lots of fried stuff? Because it's what the business owners can get. It's what comes to them. The distributors that do like fresh produce, they don't go there. At the bodegas, same thing. So what we saw, and even who they use for professional support, the bookkeepers that they use, they don't actually know how to do bookkeeping for these businesses, and so they work on a cash basis, not an accrual basis, so the business doesn't understand their finances. So one of the things we learned, for example, working with 8 BIPOC-owned restaurants in the city of Boston during COVID, ones we thought were really good and would know their stuff, did not know their pricing, did not understand the costing of what they were doing, did not understand their labor, not for any fault of their own, but because they didn't have access to those resources. And so what we did during COVID was, so imagine our kitchen, a shared kitchen, brilliant if you don't have to separate yourselves. Terrible in the world of COVID, right? We were doing manufacturing for colleges and hospitals. Guess what happened during COVID? Gone. Our organization, 40% of our budget pre-COVID was earned revenue from all of that work. Gone. So $1 million overnight out of our budget gone, in addition to the 50+ businesses that we support. So all of a sudden, I was gonna have a panic attack. What do we do?
Several.
Many, many.
Many, many.
A lot of drinking, sorry, but you know. But what we also saw was we had a refrigerator full of food, and we had chefs and entrepreneurs doing amazing stuff, and businesses like Cassandra who care about their community. That's why they do this. You ask any one of our businesses why they're doing it, it's not because they're trying to sell out as a 10X company, it's because they want to feed their community, they want to share their culture, they want to share their community. So what we did is we said, hey, you know what, let's pivot. Let's take all the food that's in our fridge, let's start to make food, and let's start to give it out to the community. Because what we also know is the world of food banks and others, that's not culturally appropriate. It is not familiar to so many people, and they're not finding the things that they want. And we knew that we could be giving people Haitian, African, right, Indonesian, Chinese, whatever it was from our businesses. And because we also already knew a lot of farms, we were also working with our farmers. So we did a ton of work with a fish company around here called Red's Best that does a lot of cooperative purchasing of fish. We started making fish stew, and all of it was just getting frozen and sent out to communities in need. And for us, this was an economic development strategy. It was, can we find money to pay businesses like Fresh Food Generation to feed their neighbors in need? Because now what we're doing is we're keeping the business going, we're keeping their employees working. Those employees now are not part of the problem, they're not part of the need, and we can find a solution. So during COVID, with all of our businesses, over $1.5 million went back into our business community. 90% of it went into business owners of color, for them to feed their neighbors, and we partnered with 30 different organizations because we don't know where people have the need. So what we know is we're good at this. How do we try to stay in that lane, and how do we partner? So we partner with a ton of the community health centers. We did a lot of that work together, and then we as an organization put all of our staff also doing food manufacturing, making food. And so we actually had a contract with the Boston Housing Authority with several other organizations, and we sent out something like 200,000 meals during COVID, having never done a meal before COVID. And I think I think it's next week, and you saw the stuff that's in the kitchen. I think it's next week we're doing our second round of staycation boxes that are going out. So this is boxes that are
Great.
going to families during school vacation. This is a terrible, really rough week if you're very low income because your kids' calories are coming from school. So we were able to get funding, and our business owners, this is not me, it's the business owners saying, we understand what our community needs. And so they're the ones who are putting together these boxes, and those are the boxes that are going out. So 500 boxes of stuff that is very much tailored to this community of things that will be resonant for them.
And what comes, and Jen, every time I talk to you, it's so you just connect the dots on food justice, nutrition security, food security, and economic development so brilliantly, and it's so intertwined. Cassandra, when I think about how you talked about doing corporate catering, you talked about institutional partners. When you think now, we're coming out of COVID, I know that it's not traditional capital that gets infused into these companies, but you guys have been very clever about partnering with hospitals, health centers, institutional universities. I think, aren't you and maybe part of MIT's food court as well? Or I know, but you guys ever. So talk to us about the different ways that as a community, we need to all step up to support companies and businesses like yours.
Yeah, I think one of the questions that have been floating in the room and on different panels today is how do you increase food access? And I think one way to do that is to support the entrepreneurs in these communities who have great ideas and who have great solutions. I always tell people that I am not a unicorn. And since we opened up in 2015, I've seen a big move from other entrepreneurs wanting to get healthy food options in their neighborhood, but they don't have the access to capital, and not to put these food entrepreneurs in a special category that we fund these groups once in a while or they're different, but they can be just as competitive as food businesses that you would find downtown.
Yeah, let me just say, I think the thing about this is how do you all as consumers be intentional to make those connections? And what we end up doing is simply being a translator to our business owners is that you need to meet them. But please understand the amount of time that we get calls saying, hey, I love food trucks. I want 3 food trucks at my event. And we have to say, okay, let's understand the economics of a food truck. I know they're cool, but these are businesses that can't afford to lose money. So let's talk about how that works. And so for all of you to understand the next time you have an event, what the kinds of things you're doing, to come to a business like Fresh Food Generation rather than to all the ones we know, Panera, Stephanie's, whatever it is, Popeyes, right? Incredible power for these businesses to create those opportunities and then to start to build those opportunities. And for us, it's trying to make those connections and then get out of the way so the business owners have those relationships.
Yeah, perfect. I want to make sure with 5 minutes left, if there are questions, comments, thoughts. Tambra, yes, go for it. Oh, microphone. Morgan? Okay, yeah, we'll do that.
Powerful, incredible story. I'm Tambra with Wanda, based out of DC, and serve on our DC Food Policy Council. So one of the questions that I think about, especially with this access to capital piece, given the fact that Mayor Wu has taken this food justice initiative to heart, I'm just curious about the opportunity to do something similar that we've done in DC around creating a Nourish DC fund that focused on BPOC food businesses and being able to put that access to capital in play where you literally create legislation that really is trying to address this gap that has created this food apartheid that needs to be ultimately remedied and the role that government can play. So I'm just curious, what recommendation would you want to your mayor to help address communities like Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, and to better support BPOC food entrepreneurs? What policy recommendation would you want to see?
I love that question. I spend way too much of my time in conversations about access to capital in Massachusetts, nationally, with and particularly for business owners of color. And it always comes down to the same damn thing: credit collateral guarantee, perceived risk. Are we worried that can the business afford it? Who is that business owner? Do we believe what that business owner is doing? Do they have credit and collateral? And if we can't get away from those things and back to the world where it's about relationships and understanding who that business owner is and why and what the opportunity is, these businesses will never get out of, will never get to a place where they can be successful in the way that they need to. I would also just say that, and Cassandra can speak to this better than anybody, they get like chopped to death by getting just enough money to never be enough. So Cassandra spent what, the first 5 years of your business pretty much full time raising money.
Yeah, why don't you speak to that, Cassandra?
Yeah, I think that we're very lucky now that we have an investor who has been by our side or who has helped us out. But I think that it took us way too long to get to that point, and I think we've had to prove ourselves way too much to be able to move along as a business, right? So. Every single thing that we got, whether it was another catering vehicle or, a robo-coup that can cut potatoes really quickly. It's presentations and numbers, and some of that is somewhat normal, but, when you're getting Keyman insurance, right, and you're doing blood tests, it's just a little bit too much for too little money. So I think that my hope is that Fresh Food Generation was a guinea pig in the new world of supporting BIPOC businesses. I hate that term, but I'll say it because everybody seems to understand it. And that people, that entrepreneurs following us don't have to jump through the same hoops. I'm really proud of where we are now as a business. And I know that we could be much further along. We should have been opening up restaurant number 2 or number 3. I'm glad we got to restaurant 1. But, I think that our tenacity and our grit and our knowledge, with the right funding, we could have been somewhere else.
Yeah. And I would just say, like, the values alignment is really important. Like, so way too much of the capital providers are talking about the risk to them. Like, why aren't we thinking about human-centered design? What is the impact we're trying to have, and what is that we need to do for the business for them to have that impact, rather than it only be about what is the return to that investor? And the return to that investor, yes, there's some social returns, but mostly they're looking for the money return.
Yeah,
and
I
that's
love that,
the
Jen. That
ethics.
human-centered design approach makes so much. It makes so much sense. That a profit-centered design, the human-centered design of these things would be great. Tawanda, I want to give you a chance to ask the last question.
Yes, thank you for the very interesting discussion. My question goes to efforts to get the community engaged, the outreach component to rally people around the business model that you're promoting, and also the small businesses that are coming out of your facility. How are they known? How are their products known by the community? Because today we have our smartphones right here, and if you want to find us, you have to find us through the modern tools that people are using to communicate. So how are you engaging with the world?
What a great question, and a very challenging question, because the reality for many of our businesses, while predominantly our businesses are owned by people of color, who are they selling to? People who look like me. So there's also an incredible component of explanation of what it is. Like, oh my God, it's Latin and Caribbean food. Will it be too spicy? Oh my God, I don't pickles. What is that? Or
Try the
whatever.
jerk chicken. Huh? Just said try the jerk chicken.
Try the chicken. Try the jerk chicken. It's amazing.
Yeah.
No, but so there's all this work we have to do to try to get the businesses out there to get them to be viable and profitable. But there is this other side, which is what are they doing in their community? And you could probably speak better than I to that reality of, like, the economics of trying to work in your community and feed your own community, and the cross-subsidy, essentially, that you were doing to make that work.
Yeah, so Jen was talking about Red's Best salmon. We actually sell Red's Best, which means that we pull up, we go to the seaport, they load the fish into our van, we take it back, we cook it, and we sell it for $14, right? Anywhere else, it would be on a menu for $26. But I'm not going to do that because I want people in my neighborhood to be able to easily buy it. And salmon is one of our best-selling items now.
Fantastic.
And I'll just say one other thing, Tawanda, to your question about how, like, people who are coming to us. So we make an active choice to recruit and tell the story for business owners interested in communities of color. And so we don't actually do a lot of promotion outside of that. And I always joke, we'd just end up with a bunch of kombucha bros otherwise, right? Like, and that's not the goal. But we're also not only looking for, right? What we see, the power of what we're doing is the relationships, the networks, like that Cassandra and I have the kind of relationship we do. Isn't that the world we're trying to get to?
Right.
This idea that we can be proximate and connected and understand each other. And so how do we take all of you that are in the larger food industries and say, there is an opportunity to connect with these businesses in a really powerful way, and there is values alignment here.
Yeah.
This doesn't have to be
Let's
one
create
way.
community, let's create connections, let's create storytelling, and let's create an economy from it. Yeah, 100%. Literally could go on with you guys all day. Huge round of applause.